Hello, all you groovy people. I am Scott Renz. I am your instructor for the Microsoft Excel VBA Macros class. This is the second class in the series. The first class was 101. This is class 102. I hope you've already watched class 101. The first class showed you how to start Excel and how to set it up to tell Excel you want to run macros. And then we made a macro by using the record a macro option. And we built the sheet. And as we were building and putting column names, we recorded all that as VBA code. And so we made our first VBA macro because we were able then to use that code to build other sheets with the same format. So you can look at that class 1 to learn that. But then in that class, I explained how in the second class, I'm going to teach you how to take two sheets. In this case, we have one that's called names and a sheet called cities. And we're going to make a third sheet based on this information. The name sheet, you see, it has first name, last name, an ID, and a city ID, which points to this other sheet's city name. So over here is this city sheet, and that city ID is this matching ID here. And so we're going to want city name and the state code here. And off of this one, we're going to want the first name and last name. And build a third sheet with that, with first name, last name, city name, city code. Okay? So let's look at that code. But we use to build that third sheet. And I call it names of cities. Okay, here's the code for it. Now, it's macro, it's a subroutine, and it's called names of cities. Now, the first statements here are these dim statements. These statements that we use to tell Excel, and a new programmer comes along using this code, what all these variable names are I'm using in this code, which is not necessary. You don't need these things. I could just say first name equal that and never having put these dims here. But that's okay, because now Excel knows it's a string type. Otherwise, everything by default would be type variant. And so I have to keep figuring out, oh, what is this thing you're making here? What kind of, oh, is that? What kind of variable is that? Well, here we're telling it and telling the new programmer what they were. So the first one we're saying is type string, which means it can be a string of characters, like a person's first name. Next thing is dim, there's a last name is a string, and then we have this one called end last row as long. Now, it's because we want to know what that last row's number is. How long? Now, we could say as integer, but integers in Excel VBA, integer type only goes up to like 32,000 and something. So if you had 33,000 rows, it's going to choke when it gets past the 32,000 and something. But if you say long, that means it's an integer that can be billions long. So that way we're safe. We'll get every single row that way. And then again, city ID, we're going to call it string type. Now, it looks like there might be numbers, but they say, well, maybe what if one starts with a zero. It's not really a number, is it? It'd be a string of numbers. And then dim I, I use the I when I'm using an incremental variable. We're calling that long because this is the one that's going to loop through all those usernames in that first sheet. So say long in case we have 32,000 names. And then I'm dimming a range type object, calling it C. Well, no reason that it's C, just arbitrary name. Because it's columns. It's a column type range. So it's actually a cell. And so it's an object type variable. It's a range type object. Now, the first thing you see I do here is say application dot screen updating was false. Well, application, it has a whole lot of functions that you can use. And this happens to be one of them is called screen updating. And you can tell it false. In other words, while you're running this macro, don't keep showing us what the screen looks like now that we changed and added a new row. Okay, let's show it what it looks like now with that new row. So no, we don't need that. Takes a lot of extra time, wasting resources. We're happy to wait till you're all done. So screen updating false. Don't tell us what's going on while it's running. Now the first thing we do is sheets add after sheets two. We want to add that third sheet after those first two. And we tell it go select sheet number 1. That's that sheet with the names on it. And we're going to find out what's that last row on it. Now cells, it's a way to refer to the cells within a worksheet. And within, look at that when the rows count. In other words, how many rows are in that sheet. Rows count. Column A, we want to get the end. But this Excel up says, don't just give us that last number. What if we got a whole bunch of blank rows there at the bottom? So it says, and Excel up, you tell him to go all the way up until the row that first has data. You give us that row number. So that's how we get the last row of data on that name sheet. And we select sheet 2, which is the cities sheet with the city and state names on it. And we're selecting it here so we can use this without stating what sheet we're looking at, because we selected sheet 2. So now that's the default sheet. If I don't say which sheet, as you can see these other, I'm saying which sheet, so it's not using that default for these lines, but this line it does. At any rate, we're going to start our loop. So for I, it's a little incremental variable. I with equals 2, starting with 2. Why? Because the first row is our header saying the name, the words first name, last name, ID, city ID. We don't want to look at those. We're not grabbing the IDs off of that row. So we're starting with 2, because that's where our actual data starts. And we grab that first name off of sheet 1, cell, row I, column 1. And we get the last name off of sheet ones. So I, which is 2 at this moment, column 2. And then the city ID is that fourth row, or I mean, sorry, fourth column. We had that ID, so we could use that to go look up the ID on the other sheet. And it's that third sheet that we made up here. Let's put that into the first row with this first name and last name of that first guy we got off of sheet 1, guy or girl. Then we're going to do this set C equals. Now we're using set here. You see over here, we don't need any set to grab this because it's just grabbing data to either put into a cell or put into a name. But here, it's a range object. Like the C is an object, a range object. So we're not like putting one piece of data, we're putting all the information describing that cell that we're finding. And part of what it finds is the cell. You can see down here, we're saying dot C row. So that's one of the things in the C range object is the row of the first cell, which in this case, there's just one cell. So we set C equals column to 1. So we're looking in the first column. And in that first column, we're going to find, and what we're going to find is this city ID that we had grabbed back here. And we're going to start with cell 1, row 1, column 1. Start looking after that. That's telling you start looking after that, which is convenient here because it's a header row. And what we want to look at is the values that are in those columns as we're looking for the city ID. And we're going to do this by rows. In other words, we keep looking row after row at this column. We actually could use this to go searching through a row and go by columns. And then Excel next, meaning if that first one isn't a hit, go to the next, because there's also an Excel previous, meaning we can actually go backward through this column. We'll go forward through it, looking for that ID. We find it. If we find it, it sets this C to the characteristics of that cell. If it didn't find it, then C would be nothing. In other words, C never got posted. So it didn't find it. So that's what C ends up nothing. It didn't find it. In which case, you could see between the if and the else, we do nothing. Didn't find anything, so there's nothing to add to the sheet. But else, if we found it, then the third cell of sheet 3 we're going to get was on sheet 2 at C dot row, because that's what this set did. Part of the information it put into that range object was what the row number was on the city ID it found. And then we're saying we want that row number and column B. You know, it was A we were searching through, but we want the data that's column B on that sheet. And that's the city name. And then in the fourth cell in that row in our new sheet, we're going to grab what was on in column D in the cities, which is the city code, the postal code. Put what was in column D, put that on the fourth one. And there, because we're now saying, if do nothing more, do these two things. And then we get the end of our loop, this for loop here. That's going from I equals 2 to last row. We say next one. In other words, we haven't hit last row yet. And look back up here in the beginning. So we do this for each of the rows from row 2 to the end, grabbing those city names if they're there. Go to the next. Finally, when we get the last row, this next we're at the end, so I'm not doing any more looping there. And then we want to do some cleanup here. We just have a sheet full of data and we don't know what it all is. So let's select that third sheet and we'll put in the first cell, we'll put the labels, first name, and then the second one we'll put last name, the third one put city, fourth one put state as headers in those, in that first row. And we want to say how wide they are. Well, because it makes it prettier. Well, first we want them so narrow you can't even read what's in it. But we want to widen it up to see all the characters. So 10 should be fine enough for each of these names. First name, last name. And the cities could be longer. So let's say that's 30 wide. And the column with for the city code, 4 is enough. It's actually 2 characters. Well, one a little wider, so have this state name at the top and fit in there. And that's for these 3 at the top, 4 at the top, A1 through D1, because it's column A, B, C, and D, rows 1, A1 through D1. We want to say that's type text. This at sign thing is equals at sign. That's the way Excel calls it. It's a text type. So, and we want the color to be green. The interior color, the fill be green. And we want it to be bold. And let's give it a name because it gives, when we said add a sheet, it gave it a default name when we probably sheet 3. But here now we want to change it, call it names of cities. And then, up here at the top, we said screen updating is false. Well, I'll make it true so that your next program, in case you wanted to show you all that updating, it will do it. And so there, that's our program. And well, let's run it. See if it works. So, here we are to our 2 sheets. These macros, and let's run this. Name the cities. Oh, okay, it's running. You haven't seen anything because we said screen updating also. So just don't let us know anything's going on. If we didn't say that, this would have disappeared as soon as I hit run, but I said no updating. So you're not seeing that this box is disappearing. And it's running through, going through each of the named, each of these rows here. Well, that's the city sheet, but it's going through this names sheet, which I can't click on there because I said screen updating is slow. But that name sheet, it has a ID and a first name, last name. Well, it's going one at a time through them. Box will go away. There. Okay, yeah, there. See, it made it. There's names with cities. So that's what it built for us. Is the first name, last name, the city name, and that state code. And maybe pretty headers for us. Now this green, now you might be wondering, how do I know that weird number makes green? Well, I could show you that. I use record a macro. Let's do that. Let's do a record a macro. Macro 2, it's called, it's okay. We don't care what name it is. And let's say, let's format the cells. And we want the fill be this green color. See? See that green? Put it in there. All right, stop. Let's stop recording the macro. And let's see what it did for us in this, making this macro 2. All right, see? Our color has that number you saw in my code. Same number there. 5296274. See, that's what we had here in this other sheet. Well, that's how I did it. That's how I knew it'd be green, because I did that record a macro. Yeah. So we don't need that anymore. Get rid of that. I don't want to save it. And so let's go back to our sheet. There's no important phone calls. Let me read that. All right. And so here's the new sheet, which it's here with these other 3. Maybe, is that where you want it? If you like it there, you could save this workbook with that new sheet, or if you wanted it somewhere else, you could, copy this, copy this to a new workbook or to some other workbook. Either make a copy of this sheet or move it or copy it, and you'll have it. So there you go. That's how you could make a 3rd sheet out of 2 other sheets. And that's the end of lesson 2. So hope you enjoyed. See you the next time. Bye-bye.